Good morning. Hey there, it's Teresa here. Had to grab myself a nice cup of tea and settle in for today's Facebook Live mini webinar. Um, the sun is shining in Wisconsin. The snow is melting. It was supposed to rain today, so this is definitely a gift. I'm quite excited about it, although truly it's melting a little too fast. We've got some real flooding going on around here. So anyway, I'm just giving a moment to see if anybody hops on. I had meant to send out a reminder about this and completely, I prepped it. I sent a test of it and then I forgot to resend it, to send it out. So we're going to give people a moment to hop on, check in viewers. Okay, so just in case they're trailing, I want to jump in. So I created this webinar, and I'm going to be doing these mini webinars on a pretty regular basis now. I'm going to shoot for once a week. Next week, I'm going to be in LA working with my coach, Jeffrey Van Dyke, so I will not be doing one next week. But I'm doing it because I'm realizing I've been doing this work, Access Abundance. It's been more than 22 years since I started it. And over those years, I have learned a ton. Now, a lot of my learning has come in the face of my own scarcity patterns, but that's the gift. I've encountered every scarcity pattern known to man, I think. I've invented a few originals, and that's the wisdom and the experience that I can share with you so that you can bypass some of those patterns, step out of them sooner, and be able to access and experience the abundance that you want more quickly and with more ease. And so it is with the topic of today's webinar, because it's all about you being able to experience more freedom, more ease and peace of mind and abundance in your life and in your bank account. And I'm going to trust that that's something that you want because you're here. So first of all, thank you for being here. Hey, Laura, glad to hear you have your coffee on the deck. It is nice in Wisconsin today. I can't quite go on the deck with this, but soon I'll do a webinar from outside, I promise. So in order to have abundance in our lives, we have to talk about something that might seem contradictory. It may seem like the exact opposite of abundance, and that's limitation. Think about it. I mean, just at the first response, doesn't it seem like limitation seems like it's the exact opposite or an oxymoron? Shouldn't be used in the same conversation as abundance. It's like, well, abundance, no limits, and limitation? What? Isn't that scarcity? But it's not, because limitation, when it's understood and integrated correctly, it actually increases abundance. It supports abundance. But to be able to get that, to make that shift, Laura's saying, yeah, that's why I'm here today, because it seems like a contradiction. In order to make that shift, we have to actually start by talking about something that really is the opposite of abundance, and that's scarcity. Okay, so we're going to talk about scarcity en route to a conversation about abundance. And through that time, we're going to also talk about things like limitation and deprivation. So this is going to be fun. I'm going to mess with your brains a little bit here. So what do I mean by scarcity? Let's go straight to the dictionary. Dictionaries, when you got a term, go to the dictionary. It's a great way to find out what we mean by it. The dictionary defines scarcity as not enough, lack, limitation, there's that word again, or insufficient or inadequate supply. Scarcity is the opposite of abundance on the spectrum. Now, that being said, scarcity is something you will always experience. If you think that somehow by being abundant, you're never going to experience scarcity, you're already off course. See, scarcity is a part of the human condition. There are times in our lives, they may be temporary or they may be permanent, where we will experience not enough, where we will have an insufficient supply of something. If I wanted to buy Oprah Winfrey's Hawaii home right now, I have an insufficient supply of funds. That's just the truth. Doesn't mean one day I may not have a sufficient supply, but right now, ain't happening. That's scarcity. Now, notice I'm not particularly wigged out about that. Notice I'm not like, oh my God, scarcity. Notice there's no real stress or change in my energy. That's just the truth. Now, this is what I call natural scarcity or inherent scarcity. It's part of the physical world. It's a natural part of life. I have this client of mine. I think she's all of 5'1". And whenever I'm talking about this concept at a live workshop and she's there, I always call on her, poor girl. And she stands next to me. So I'm like 5'10" and she's at most 5'1". And we talk about how she has a scarcity of inches, especially if she's trying to reach something on a tall cupboard. She doesn't have enough inches to be able to reach something up high that I can reach piece of cake. Scarcity we experience. It may be temporary, or for her, it's pretty much permanent. She stopped growing. Now, our ability to experience the things we want, like freedom and ease and well-being and abundance, actually is impeded or limited, no pun intended, when we fail to accept this natural scarcity, whether it's a temporary or a permanent type. Let me give you a couple of examples. This is going way back from when I first started to put this together. I was listening, it was in the early 2000s, and I was listening to NPR, the news, and they were talking about how they had to place like a moratorium on red snapper fishing around the panhandle of Florida. That they had to put a moratorium. Commercial fishermen, everybody, they could no longer catch red snapper. Now, why do you think they had to put that moratorium on there? Well, it's because prior to that moratorium, the fishermen were just taking all the red snapper that they could take, and they got to a point that they overfished it. And if they continued at that rate, red snapper would not have time to repopulate. There would soon be no red snapper to fish. So they had to put a moratorium on fishing so the red snapper population could repopulate. Now, had the commercial fishermen honored that there's only a certain number of red snapper we can fish without wiping out the population, they wouldn't have had to have that moratorium. They could have kept fishing consistently, had a consistent income, not had to go into, oh my gosh, how am I going to make money because we can't catch red snapper. So that's one example. Another very common one, I've lived it. We want to buy something. There's something we want, and at the moment we do not have the funds, the money to buy that thing. Does that stop us? Oh no, we have this wonderful thing called credit cards, right? And so we just put it on a credit card, and then we have what we want right now, but then we have to keep paying off that credit card for months or years and pay interest on it. So those are examples of when we don't honor real limits, we can actually detract from our abundance. We can create what I call unnecessary scarcity in our lives. So unnecessary scarcity. Now that's something you don't have to live with. That's something that you can do something about. You will experience scarcity, limitation, insufficient supply at times in your life. But that's different than unnecessary scarcity. That is completely discretionary and optional, and it's really up to you. So what do I mean by unnecessary scarcity? I have two definitions for unnecessary scarcity. One is a disempowered or an unhealthy a reaction to some of those limits that we encounter that are temporary. But I want it and I want it now, so I'm just going to go charge it. And I don't care what my interest is, and I don't care how long it's going to take me to pay it off. Been there, done that. Okay. Then I created unnecessary scarcity because next month I had even less money because now I had to make the payment on the bill and the next month and the next month, which had me sometimes saying, but now I have to charge another thing because I don't have money for it. And you get where I'm going. Ever been there? Ever done that? Another one. And I'm going to bet you've experienced this one because I haven't met a person who hasn't. So imagine that you are out with friends. Maybe you're at a friend's house. You have a friend who's like a gourmet cook, and she's decided to have this gourmet dinner for you and a bunch of friends. And so you're all sitting around the table and you're talking, and she brings out the appetizers, and they were just scrumptious. And then she brings out the main course. Maybe she's Italian. I'm thinking of a friend of mine who's a gourmet Italian chef. And she's brought out this dish, this lasagna or this manicotti or whatever it is. And it's so good. And there's a salad and there's vegetables, and it's so good. I mean, it tastes good, and your body is feeling really good, like it's giving it energy. And then you're having this great conversation with your friends. Oh, it's like, it can't get any better than this. And then your host, the gourmet chef, notices that there's some more of this lasagna or manicotti that she's made, and says, who wants some more? And who wants some more? And you know, it tastes so good. And so I want some more. I want some more. And you have another piece, and oh man, that is the best you've ever had. And then there's just like one last piece, and your friend says, you know what, it's not worth saving, so somebody's got to eat this last piece. Who's it going to be? And you're waiting for somebody else to take it, and nobody does. And you're like, oh, it's so good, it tastes so good. It's like, okay, I'll have it. And so you start eating this third helping of it, and it tastes so good. And then it's like, oh, your stomach starts to hurt, and your stomach starts to not feel so good. And you're starting to wish you hadn't taken that last piece. Now it's not so good because you're not feeling so good. Have you been there, done this one ever before, Laura? You with me on this one? Yeah, like we didn't honor the natural limit, like I'm full, it's time to stop. And because we went past it, suddenly what was so good and wonderful suddenly wasn't so good. And that's an example of unnecessary scarcity we create when we don't honor natural limits. Another definition of unnecessary scarcity is what I call a perception. Laura's going, oh yeah, a perception of lack or limitation or not enough that we have, but it's inaccurate. We think it's true, we think it's the truth, and it's not. It's not. Here's a couple of examples. I work with clients around their money stuff a lot, and oftentimes not oftentimes, since I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, but occasionally I'll work with people and they'll say, well, this is the most I'll ever get paid. This is all the money I can make. You know, they don't pay teachers any more than this. So they live with this limited idea of this is all the money I can make. It's inaccurate. Now, it may be all the money they can make in that particular job, working for that at that particular place, but it's not. That's all the money they can make. That's one example. I can think of a couple from my mind. A few years ago, well, not so many years ago, my coach called me big time on a scarcity pattern that I didn't realize was a scarcity pattern. I was undercharging for my services. And I thought I had to charge this more affordable amount for my services because my clients can't afford it and they wouldn't want to pay. They wouldn't be able to pay more than this. And if I charge more and they don't buy, then I don't pay my bills. All sorts of scarcity, my own and enabling my clients in their own scarcity. So I took this big leap and I raised my program prices quite significantly. And I was fully prepared to have all of my current clients say, nope, not going to continue working with you. Too much of a jump, Teresa. Every single one of them continued to work with me at the higher prices. So my whole belief that they couldn't afford it, they wouldn't spend that money, inaccurate. And I had limited myself and created a bunch of unnecessary scarcity and stress for myself and my business for years. My favorite example, however, of a perception of lack or limitation that's not accurate and then winds up limiting our abundance goes back, gosh, Dan and I have been married now, will be 26 years in May. So it goes back more than 26 years. From the moment I met Dan, which is now what, 28 years ago, he always was telling me that he had this dream. He wanted to take his dad on this charter fishing trip, going off into the Great Lakes on a charter boat. You've got the boat and you're catching Great Lakes, salmon or whatever. And they have the fancy rod and reels. It's kind of like a mini wide world of sports experience. And he would tell that this was his dream and this was his dream. And he kept saying from the moment, but I don't have the money. It's really expensive and I don't have the money. So I kind of bought in, it's really expensive and we don't have the money. And then I left my corporate job and we were starting my business at home. Laura's loving that fishing. I'm talking to my fisher girl here. And so, we're starting a business. So of course we can't afford it. We can't afford it. We don't have the money. We don't have the money. It's a great dream, but we don't have the money. Let's keep working hard to make the money. And then one Christmas, probably about 2 or 3 years after we were married, 2 years after we were married, both my parents had died, and I could tell that Dan's dad was going downhill. He was aging rapidly. And on the way home from that trip to Detroit that Christmas, I said, Dan, if you ever want to have this dream come true, you better make it happen. We better make it happen this year because your dad's not going to be able to go on the trip for much longer. So with that impetus, for the first time, we actually looked into these fishing trips, got online, did some research, found this Captain Dan, we thought that was appropriate, and up in Michigan, who did charter fishing boats. And we discovered that we could take his dad and his mom and Dan and I on this rent the boat for a whole day, go out for a whole day. There were cabins right at the dock that we could stay in. And the cabins for 2 nights and the charter fishing trip at that time was going to cost all of a whopping between $250 and $300. That was it. We had to get to Michigan. His mom and dad lived in Michigan. They had to drive to it. And beyond that, for the charter trip and staying in these cabins, about $300 total. Can you see how our perception that it was expensive and we didn't have enough money was really inaccurate? And because we never got the clarity, we just kept believing that inaccurate perception, we missed out on what could have been many fishing trips with Dan's dad and mom. Now, why do we have this hiccup energy around limitation? Most people fear limitation or avoid limitation because we don't want to feel deprived. That was my old mantra when Dan and I got into the mountain of debt way back before I started Access Abundance. Dan said, we have to cut back. We have to cut back. And I was like, I don't do deprivation. Wasn't going to do deprivation. Yet what I now know is when we don't accept and honor real limitations and break through those inaccurate ones, we wind up feeling deprived anyway. We missed out on multiple fishing trips. When we were paying off all the debt, we missed out on lots of things that we could have used that money for instead of paying off credit card bills. You see, deprivation is about not having something you need or want. That's what deprivation's about. Limitation is actually about having those things, but maybe it will be in a smaller quantity, at least for a time, than you want. But it's not depriving you from things that are enjoyable or fun or fulfilling. It's just putting limits around them so that you can have those things. Now, Laura knows this about me. I like to garden, and we have 4 acres. And among many things we grow here, we have raspberries and we have grapevines. And very soon, now that spring is coming, either Dan and I are going to go out and we're going to need to prune those vines. We're going to cut the raspberries way back. We're going to shrink them. We're going to cut off parts of them. We're going to limit their size. And we're going to limit their size because what we know is in so doing it, it actually supports them to produce more. We prune them every year because it helps the plants focus their energy on producing fruit. This is a great metaphor for how limitation, the right kinds, healthy limitation, honoring natural limits, actually supports abundance. It doesn't get in the way of it. Yeah, pruning supports growth. Whereas if we let our raspberries just grow wild or our grapes go wild, they would over time produce less and less fruit because all their energy would go towards leaves and vines and all of that and not to fruit. And this is the same way for us in our lives. If we're trying to do too many things or spread ourselves too thin or go here, there, and everywhere and using our money in that way, we're going to wind up having less of what we want because we haven't focused it and channeled it with healthy limits so that we can have what we want and be able to continue to have what we want. My favorite story that speaks to how limitation, like how to practice what I call this prosperity principle of limitation in a way that supports abundance and freedom and well-being, is with a story that I'm going to bet you heard when you were a kid. You've maybe read it to your own kids. And if you have grandkids, you may be reading it to them. It's the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears. And you probably know the story, like Goldilocks came onto this cabin and she was hungry and there was 3 bowls of porridge on the table. And one was too hot and one was too cold and one was just right. And then there was a chair and one was too big and one was too small and one was just right. And then there was the bed and one was too soft and one was too hard and one was just right. That impulse for just right, that's abundance. Not too much, not too little. The only way you can make sure you find that just right amount is with limitations. You have to give yourself something, otherwise it's too little. But if you give yourself too much, that isn't going to work either. So this is true around money. You know, I work with people, it's like, I don't like the word budget. And I get it, because they think of budget as an instrument of deprivation, not an instrument of healthy limitation that supports abundance. It can happen around our eating habits. It can happen around our exercise habits. My clients are all or nothing people. And so this is a really difficult principle for them to practice. Not too much, not too little, just right. Not depriving you, but placing healthy limits around it so you can have at least some of all that you want and then have more in the future, using the pruning analogy. So limitation is not the same as deprivation. In fact, as I know all too well, a fear of deprivation that has you rebel against limitation actually winds up having you feel more deprived because you will not have the money, time, and energy for things that you want. Limitation can actually be an impulse to creativity, which is always going to support abundance, and it can actually channel and focus your money, your time, your energy on those things that are most important to you, and in so doing, create even more abundance, more fruit, just like our grapevines and raspberries. So now it's your turn. You too, Laura. Time to look at your life. And if money is one of those places where you're experiencing scarcity, deprivation, all of this sort of stuff, look at your bank account too. What are the ways that you don't honor natural or real limits that you currently have, even if they're temporary ones? And in so doing, you create unnecessary scarcity and struggle and stress that, oh, I wish I hadn't had that third piece feeling in your life. And how is your refusal to honor limits actually winding up depriving you of what you want, joy and peace and ease? Like that third piece, and no longer am I experiencing ease and joy. It's kind of like tarnished the whole evening. Where might you have a so Laura's going right now. I think it might be time, need some time limitation, which reminds me, I was at a conference yesterday and Sandra Yancey was the speaker. She's the founder of eWoman Network, and she spoke something that you might like, Laura, and it fits in with this. She said, you know, it's not a question of time management. It's a question of boundary management. When we set and honor boundaries, we'll discover we have lots of time for the things that we want time for. It's another way of saying what I'm talking to you about. But then on the other hand, where might you have a perception of lack or limitation that might not be accurate? Either because it's based on a conscious or subconscious disempowering belief, well, I can't make more money than this, or it's based on inaccurate information or lack of clarity, like our fishing trip. And with that awareness, what's an action you can take to start to harness the power and the prosperity of limitation, not deprivation, limitation, that fosters more freedom, more peace, more well-being and abundance in your life? I'm also curious, so please put this in the comments. Has your understanding of limitation, especially in terms of abundance, changed now from where it was at the beginning of the call? Does something new come up for you around limitation? Or maybe it's like, I still am not liking that word. In which case, there may be some deeper stuff going on. So I'm curious on your comments and curious on your questions. Yeah, creating some limitations around your time may benefit. And that's not saying you don't have enough time. It's more about, oh, this is what I want my time for, and so I'm going to allocate this amount for it, and this amount, and this amount. And then you're not depriving yourself of having time for the things you want, but you are limiting how much time you have for it so you can have it all. That's how limitation can support abundance. Now, if one of the places where you are chronically experiencing unnecessary scarcity and lack and limitation, where you're afraid of deprivation, you don't know how to put healthy limits around money, if money's just one of those places where this is really hitting home, then I would love to have the opportunity to maybe give you some more direction of how you can claim your power around money. And for that, I just invite you, just this week, we got it all ready to go. A few weeks ago, I did a live webinar that's called Claim Your Money Power. And I'm typing that in right now on the thing, power.com. And we made a recording of it. And so now that recording is available for you to sign up. And so if money's one of these places where it's like, oh, how do I apply this? How do I create ease and freedom and peace for you around money? Then there'll be some more tips and tools in that. It's a longer webinar, 90 minutes. But you can go to claimyourmoneypower.com, scroll down, read about it. Sounds like it could support you. Then just subscribe to have us send you the link so you can access the recording of it, because there's a lot more tools on that call that could support you not only to embrace the power of limitation, but to really embrace your power around money. And I'd love that opportunity to support you. So that's what I've got today. So do not fear limitation. It can actually support abundance when you know how to harness its power. And most of all, limitation is not deprivation. When we do not set and honor limitation, we experience deprivation and unnecessary scarcity. So that's what I've planned for today. Just want to check in with you, Laura, see if you have any closing comments or questions. Those of you who are catching the replay, feel free to add them. I'll check and respond. But just want to give Laura a chance to see if she has any comments or questions. And I'm going to take a sip of my tea. Anything, Laura? Final comments for you? I don't know how long it takes to type, so. Okay. Oh, there we go. For sure. I love the pruning idea. Yeah. And I can see where, as a parent, I already set limitation around my kids, like TV snacks, how dirty they can get before they must bathe, even how they are allowed to spend their money. Looking at that, there are areas I can better parent myself in a kind and loving. What a great metaphor. Great metaphor. Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, it was when I finally got that deprivation and limitation are not the same, not in any way, shape, or form. In fact, my resistance of deprivation created more deprivation. And the more I've learned to embrace and honor limits, whether they're temporary ones, this is how much cash or money I have right now, or like, permanent ones, like I only have 24 hours in a day. That's what's allowed me, to experience more freedom and ease and money as well. So glad you made that connection. Thank you for being here, Laura. Thanks to those of you who caught the replay. Like I said, probably 2 weeks from today, I'll be back with another webinar, but next week I'm going to be immersed working with my coach in LA. So I'll be doing my 2-minute mystery messages next week, but another webinar will be 2 weeks from today. Stay tuned. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.